I admit that I was surprised that Derek Chauvin was convicted on all three counts. I knew that he would be convicted of some of them when the cops testified against him. He was going down for something, but all three charges? Huh, all right then. And I'm glad for the Floyd family that they don't have to live with the man who murdered their loved one walking around free. There's nothing that will bring George Floyd back, nothing. But at least his family has the satisfaction that the man who took him away from them will be punished for it. And that's what prison is, punishment. It's not accountability as some people are framing it. And I understand that many people don't understand that, but let's be clear. Prison is punishment. It's not accountability. And I'm glad that Derek Chauvin will be punished and is going to prison for what he did, the wanton public execution of George Floyd. I'm glad that Chauvin looked genuinely shocked and concerned as the verdict was read in the courtroom yesterday. I absolutely did take some morbid pleasure in seeing the fear and confusion and what looked to me like genuine disbelief as the guilty verdict was read for every charge in Chauvin's eyes. I hope he's terrified, honestly. And I don't begrudge people for celebrating that verdict right now. I always have to remind myself that we're not all as conscious about the depth of this system's depravity as I think I am, and as the people I'm in community and organizations with are, who I still learn from. I know that people believe that this verdict is a victory, that it's progress, and I'm not going to berate anyone for believing that. What I will do is tell the truth about the situation, though, and it's a downer, and it's not going to make some people happy, and we really don't have time to worry about all that. Because Derek Chauvin was clearly offered up as the scapegoat for the Minneapolis PD, which has a long history of police brutality, to keep the masses under control in that city. If I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chauvin wasn't actually charged until people burned down the police station. So firing him might have been the only move the police department was going to go with until the people said that wasn't enough. And while it's great that it was the people that pushed the prosecution of Derek Chauvin, let's not be under any illusions that this is how every incident of police terrorism and murder will be adjudicated from now on. Remember that there are 3 other cops who are awaiting trial who were also involved in the murder of George Floyd. This isn't over. And remember that while Chauvin was on trial in the Minneapolis area, cops shot and killed 2 other people. Yes, 1 cop has been arrested and charged, but don't hold your breath expecting the same outcome for her as for Chauvin. And I'm not saying the cop who shot Daunte Wright won't be convicted of the charges. I'm just saying don't use this verdict in the Chauvin case as the new standard for how police abuse will be handled across the board. Some are saying that the guilty verdict in this case was obvious, like saying water is wet. But let's not forget that Rodney King's brutal beating was also captured on video and was obvious, as was Philando Castile's killing, as was Walter Scott's. So what's obvious to you and me and rational people, and you don't even have to be radical, just you have to have a brain that functions normally, these things aren't obvious to people who believe in and prop up this system that has resisted every type of change. That's suspect. Police will use this verdict as the inflection point to concede to some reforms. That's what they're going to say. But largely, they will still resist any efforts to actually defund the police, implement community control over the police, or doing anything that isn't in their benefit to maintain the status quo. And politicians are already saying liberal reforms hogwash, with Keith Ellison claiming that this verdict should compel the passage of the completely insufficient George Floyd Act, to Nancy Pelosi saying the horrible things she did about George Floyd gave his life for justice. George Floyd did not willingly lay down his life for anything. His life was snatched from him in the most calloused and heinous way by a cop who didn't see him as a human being worth treating as such, and by 3 other cops who felt the same way and let him do it. Let's not let politicians hijack the truth for their liberal, mealy-mouthed platitudes that will also result in not a doggone thing changing for us. As the Chauvin verdict was read, I think it happened even before it was read. Ohio cops shot and killed a 15-year-old girl who they say was attacking someone with a knife. They've released the body cam footage. But honestly, with all the hardware cops have, tasers and chemical spray and batons and all this training, they still go for lethal force in too many cases where the subject isn't a disturbed white male. Never forget that right now, Mumia Abu-Jamal and countless other political prisoners are held captive unjustly by the state. Right now, human beings are being denied decency and their human rights in every prison and jail in this country. Up to 500,000 people are sitting in jail on any given day in this country just awaiting trial. They haven't even been convicted of anything, and they will stay in jail for years before their case is even adjudicated. And of course, there are white people in this situation, but an overwhelming percentage of those people are Black, brown, and poor. Rather than providing decent paying jobs, quality health care, education for all, quality housing for all, rather than providing a truly equal and just society, the system will continue to sustain the inequities that they know create chaos and desperation, then use that chaos and desperation as an excuse to over-police the communities and the people that they made chaotic and desperate. What do I mean? Well, when the opioid epidemic hit Rust Belt towns that were left barren of manufacturing jobs that were shipped overseas, that sustained whole communities, it was clearly understood by politicians and think tank organizations that the lack of that social stability, the ability to take care of oneself and one's family, contributed to the desperation of addiction and all the chaos that comes with trying to survive in the underground, in the illegal economy, when legit jobs just aren't there. But see, they received compassion and programs, government funding. But communities like George Floyd's and Mike Brown's and Eric Garner's and Rekia Boyd's and Andy Toledo's and yours and mine that were hit with the same economic void are left with all the systemic inequities that were designed to create the desperation, despair, and chaos that they used to justify militarized, brutal, oppressive, murderous policing. No compassion and programs for us. So this will not change. Chauvin's verdict was the sacrifice the state was willing to make this one time to cause you to ignore all the other hell that will continue to exist for us while claiming they're willing to reform the system, but they won't actually reform the system because this system cannot be reformed. It can only be destroyed so that we can build something much, much better for all of us. And only then will we stop having to have these conversations about celebrating one cop who's held accountable for his crime. Follow Luqman Nation on patreon.com/LuqmanNation for lots of great content.